Thanks everybody for letting me come here tonight and share with you. And first question I want to ask is, before this evening, how many of you knew the Missouri River in our state was named after an Indian tribe? Well, that's a pretty good showing, and I would expect a group like this to know that. In most settings, most people, probably a fourth or less, actually know that, and I think that's just kind of a shame. So I'm trying to rectify that. I wrote a book, and I've got some for sale here if you're interested. It's called People of the River's Mouth, The Search for the Missouri Indians. And we came up with that title because I had to search long and hard to find information on the Missouri Indians. When I was a kid, about the size of those little guys back there in Troop 99, I was very interested in Indians. I had relatives that grew up in western Oklahoma, and I had some second and third cousins who were Indians. And so I was always kind of enamored with that whole western thing. And we got a World Book Encyclopedia when I was about 9 or 10. I cracked it open to read the section on Indians, and there was a map there, and it had Missouri on it. And then I figured out, I says, oh, well, that's one of the Indian tribes. And then I tried looking up information about it. About everything I could find for 30 years said a small tribe of central Missouri, now extinct. And as I got into that, and as I got older and became an academic historian, I thought, you don't name a river in a state after somebody that was nobody. And so I just got curious. And like I say, I had contacts with the Osage tribe and the Otoe Missouria tribe, who were intimately connected, of course, with these people. And I started asking questions, and I had one Otoe Missouria friend that I said, Matt, I think I'm going to write the first history book about the Missouri Indians. And he looked at me and he whistled and he said, are you nuts? He said, there's just not anything out there. And he says, most of the elders don't know a great deal about that ancient part of our history, but he said, I'll help you all I can. And so here we are about 6 years later with this presentation. So I'll get going and tell you what I've learned about the Missouri Indians and what they did around here a little bit. And this first image that you see here, this is the most commonly published image of a Missouri Indian that there is. It's Mahinkacha, the maker of knives, by the Swiss artist Karl Bodmer. And Bodmer drew his picture in 1833 and actually made a painting and a lithograph, in 1834. Come on. There we go. This is the group picture that Mahinkacha was in, and this is a Missouria Indian, an Otoe Indian, Chief of the Poncas by Karl Bodmer. And I'm showing you this. There's two different language groups of Indians here. The Missouria and the Otoe speak a language that we call, it's a dialect of the Siouan language called Shiwari. The Poncas speaks a dialect of the Siouan language known as the Iga, and that is the same language that's pretty much spoken by the Osage. There we go. Now the Shiwari and Daguian language groups, collectively, we tend to call those groups, from an anthropological standpoint, the Southern Siouans, or a prairie cultural group. And the ones that come up in red, the Ho-Chunk, formerly known as the Winnebago, the Iowa, the Missouri, the Otoe, those are all Shiwari speakers. The ones coming up in blue, Quapaw, Osage, Kanza, Omaha, and Ponca, those are the Iga speakers. And they more or less, in a very, very broad fashion, because there are tribal-specific customs and dialects and traditions, but in a very, very broad respect, these people lived very similar lifestyles, dressed somewhat the same. They could tell each other whose tribe they were in. but from our perspective, there's some shared traditions and shared lifestyles of those groups. So Southern Siouxs are prairie cultural group. In other words, like in Missouria, you can find cultural elements of these woodland Indians to the east, Plains Indians to the west, the cultural groups in the southeast like Cherokees, Creeks, and so forth. And you can find elements of all of them mixed up here in the Midwest to some degree. Okay, this is a map that was drawn in 1732 by Jean-Baptiste d'Anville, and this is a pretty good rendering of the Missouri River, and this also happens to be the first map ever published. It shows Pierre Fletch, Rock of Arrows, or Arrow Rock, right here. I always have to get a plug in for Arrow Rock, you know. But Arrow Rock was a major source of flint on the Missouri River, and of course the bluffs down here were a major source of flint too. But the very earliest recording of the existence of the people, the Missouris and Missouria, I use the word Missouria. It is a proper name, and sometimes it's easier for me when I say Missouria, you know I'm talking about Indians instead of talking about the river or the state. But the French always were the first Frenchmen that recorded the existence of the Missouris was Father Marquette in 1673. And as he came down the Mississippi River and they passed the mouth of the Missouri River, he asked his Peoria Indian guides, and always remember this, these Western explorers always had local guides with them. They weren't out there on their own hacking their way through the wilderness. They were asking the local people, okay, what's over here? If we go this way, what do we find? So we have to give credit where credit's due. But he asked what people lived on the river, and the Peoria replied, "We Missouria, ou Missouria," which in French, or in the Algonquin language of the Peoria, translated to French, or more properly not translated, is interpreted, because it's very difficult to translate English into Missouria and many of the Indian languages. It roughly means people of the canoe, specifically a wood canoe. And the Missourians, actually, their name for themselves was Nietachi, which is the Shawari language, and it means people of river's mouth, or that's how it can be interpreted. And here's where their name came from, people of the wood canoe. This is a painting by George Kaplan in 1833 on the upper Missouri, and there's just these nice big dugout canoes with these Indians going down the river. And of course, you know, we all know historically there were just gigantic cottonwoods, sycamore, and walnut trees all up and down the river, and they were making these giant dugout canoes. Now these are Virginia Indians, but this method of making those canoes was virtually the same all over North America. But that's where the name Missouri comes from. Now their other name, tribal name, Nietachi, of the river's mouth, it's a reference to the mouth of the Grand River. And this map here shows key archaeological sites associated with the Oneota culture. Oneota culture was the predecessor to the historic Indian tribes that we had in Missouri. In other words, the Missourians, before the French write about them, they're actually Oneotas. That's the cultural group they belong to. The Osages are Oneotas, the Omahas, the Otos, the Iowas, they're all part of this Oneota culture. They become the tribes that we know once Europeans start identifying them that way and say, oh, well, that's this people and this people. But this here on the bend of the river, and of course, you can get a good idea. This is Saline County, and we're down here right now. How many of these sites were clustered here. And they talk about the river's mouth, the Grand River up here circled. That gives you its relationship to it. And previously, before channelization and all our marvels of technological adaptation, the Grand River in this area is very low lying, was basically a big delta, big marshy delta, so the mouth moved around different places. But they referred to that river for a very specific reason why they live here, and I'll show you that in a moment. Whoops.